Bishop Academy Books. Presenting The Children's Encyclopedia by Arthur Mee.
The wonderful things nature built with her box of bricks. She has filled the earth, the air, the waters with abounding forms of life. All arose from creatures as simple as the one-celled animals of our waters. From those lowly creatures during unthinkable periods of time came all life. No changes effected in the crucible of the scientist match the marvels wrought in nature's processes. She had all time and all substance for her work. The one group of elements sufficed for all the diverse outlines and characteristics known in the Book of Life. Our oak, crocodile, whale, elephant, man are all made up of precisely the same elements, differently grouped and arranged. A boy with a box of bricks builds first a cottage and then a castle. Nature, with her box of bricks, built man and mouse and mammoth, reptile and bird and insect at different times and from different starting points. In the waters of a twilight world were the first of created life forms, mere specks of living jelly. From these substances nature evolved a succession of creatures new and strange. She changed a creature a little and changed its children more, and the changes became constant, as the changes which man effects in flowers, birds, and animals by scientific breeding are constant. Jellyfish arose, and to protect them from creatures which would have devoured them, nature gave them stings. Worms were formed in infinite variety, and from them came insects and the sea urchins, brittle stars, and so on. Then along another line came the crustaceans. First of all, nature's little men in armor, then the things with shells such as we recognize in the mollusks and gastropods, and as shell design became a fixed feature of life, the way was open for the cuttlefish to take his place in the increasing army. We are sketching very rapidly only one imaginary line of ascent, so that 1,000 details are omitted. Let us hasten to the first attempt at a backbone. Nature seems to have toyed with this idea in several forms. Two of her experiments are with us today. The lanceolets and the tunicates of modern times never are, but always seem likely to be, blessed with backbones. Each young one seems about to grow one, but the promise is never realized, and the adult is grouped like its ancestors, with the backboneless. There they are today to suggest what all creation might have been like had not nature succeeded at last in finding a line of life fit to bear spine and ribs. Lancelet and tunicate, deprived of the backbone, never got any further forward, and thousands of other failures of which we have no record must have passed out of knowledge. But at last fishes came, strong, pliant, bold. The vertebrates had come, and all things were possible. Fishes multiplied in number and species, and the idea of armor having taken root on the bodies of crustaceans and mollusks, the fish must have their armor too. And arm they did, in mail of bony plates, invulnerable to any teeth then in existence. Nearly all fish took to armor for ages, and the sturgeon and half a dozen other floating fortresses survived to remind us of what they were. Things were developing apace in the waters as each successful feature established itself, and fishes gradually grouped themselves in an ascending scale of power and merit. But the greatest adventure had yet to come. Life had to cease swimming and march. It had to come ashore. To do so, gills, which breathe oxygen in water, had to yield place to lungs, which breathe air. What a change this was, when we may infer from what would happen if men tried to convert themselves now from air breathers into water breathers, and to forsake the land for the sea. Life had to make the hazard in those old days, and vertebrates came trembling ashore to be left high and dry when the tide ebbed, and to be recovered when the tide flowed again, and finally, after millions of years, to come right inland and possess the earth. That was one of the most dramatic epochs in the story of animate nature. It was the beginning of a pageant whose source was the waters and whose summit was mankind. A sea squirt at one end of the line and Shakespeare at the other. Once life had landed, it made fast, and the developments which had begun in the deep were multiplied on earth. The great forms were amphibian: frogs, toads, salamanders, things which were born in the water and came ashore to live. The early amphibians grew gigantic, some of them as big as oxen. But the reptiles, creatures born on land, were the next to advance. They also attained a colossal size, but though they possessed the earth and ruled in horror, the future did not lie with them, for there was not a brain worthy of the name among them. Forth from one of the reptile groups came the ancestors of the birds. The reptiles themselves took to the air in numbers, huge, loathsome-looking things with leathery wings. The real dragons, though they did not breathe fire. The age of reptiles was the most appalling, we must suppose, that ever old Earth has witnessed. The sea was turbulent with the movements of the colossal swimming fish lizard called Ichthyosaurus. The marshy land trembled and squelched beneath the tread of giant dinosaurs, which, squatting on their haunches, pulled down the tops of trees to feed. Carnivorous monsters devoured herb-eating dinosaurs. The nightmare creature called Stegosaurus roamed about with its immense bulk and length, armed with great bosses of bone along the back. The incredible Brontosaurus, the terrific iguanodons, creatures of the lizard order, were there, and in the air were the pterodactyls, flying reptiles with teeth as terrible as crocodiles. These were the masters of that amazing world. The birds began pretty much where the pterodactyls left off, for the Archaeopteryx, first of birds, was lizard-like in body, in tail, teeth, and jaws. Its tail was long and jointed, but feathers grew from each joint. At last the hour sounded for the dawn of mammal life for creatures that have hair or fur, warm blood, and the highest characteristic of all, the habit of nurturing their young on milk. They came from a reptile origin. Man bears the seal upon his body of faraway ancestors who were reptiles. The first mammals were little timid animals, and how they kept their helpless young alive in such a world. But they did it by the exercise of a new quality. Something which made the earth worthwhile appeared. It was love, mercy, the spirit of self-sacrifice, the sublime power which makes us ready to lay down our lives for others. That was the condition which changed the face of nature when mammals came into being. It did not happen forthwith, but the mere fact that mammals survived the early days of danger on that reptile-ridden earth tells us that love for offspring was triumphant. The doom of brute frightfulness arrived when animal love conquered peril. The same varying development which we see among fishes and reptiles took place among mammals. Armor and size were the order for the reptiles, size and weapons for the mammals. That was the plan for most. Herb eaters grew gigantic. The flesh eaters grew huge too. Bears bigger than any now existing, tigers immense and strong with tusks like sabers, lions of appalling size and power. There is nothing tending to increase of bulk to which nature has not given rein. Every order existing today has had its giant in the past. Nature, though she explored possibilities with every order, though she sent the whale and walrus back from the land and let them grow monstrous in the sea, has ceased her strivings for giants and Methuselahs. No more does she produce enormous trees, which last thousands of years, or dinosaurs that live 2 centuries. She creates more trees, but gives them shorter lives. She summons into existence more animals, but gives them a briefer span. All the giant reptiles are gone, all the giant mammals, save the whale, elephant, rhinoceros, and hippopotamus. All the myriads of armored fish have vanished, save 7 groups. Birds have lost their reptile teeth and have gained 1,000 graces. Mammals have increased their speed and cunning and lost inches in weight. Man himself has lost his hairy body covering, his gloomy brow and mighty canine teeth. Much has gone of the animal world which the reptiles knew. Its secrets have now to be sought in the rocks formed from the age-old mud into which past forms sank to die. The best and highest yet remain to proclaim the wondrous story. The past is full of nightmare terror and fantasy, interpreted by creatures turned to fossils underneath our feet. Now comes nature's highest yet, man, the only creature to whom a soul is given, in whom the brain has become the master organ of the body. Though he rises from the same ancestral stock which produced apes and monkeys and lemurs, he is the supreme achievement of nature, and having made him master of her kingdom, its animals, its resources, and many of its secrets, it would seem as if nature means him to act the role of viceroy of the earth, and himself to mold the forces which, until his coming, were wielded by nature herself. And what will man do with his powers? His conduct in the discharge of his trust will determine whether the animal world generally is in its cradle or is approaching a destiny which is to be a tomb.